Hey everyone, Dr. Yu here, and today we're going to look at the second to last lesson in the reading section. So this lesson is actually more like a synthesis of a lot of the skills that you have learned before. So this lesson is called Evaluate and Integrate Data from Multiple Sources in Various Formats, including media. These are the learning objectives, and you can see a lot of these requirements are really related to some of the stuff that we have talked about before. For instance, select a relevant data, right? This is about relevancy. So you need to evaluate, based on the question, which data you need to look for from the passage and do a little bit analysis. Examine various data sources. So you may see different data formats. There could be different types of graphs. It could be a bar graph, it could be a pie chart, could be a line graph. Organize data from various sources. So this is very similar, right? So pretty much all these are about identify data, organize data, and then extract that information. Combine data from various sources into one document. Now, I don't think they're going to ask you to do this particular task on TEAS because there's no way that they can have something for you to combine into one document. So you can probably skip this one. And then last one, this is where most of the questions are based on. So you need to be able to interpret the information from text, charts, or graphs and make some kind of conclusion, right? Do a little bit synthesis and draw conclusions. All right. So these are some of the questions that you may see on TEAS. Of course, it's not going to be word by word, but those questions will be very similar and they're going to ask you pretty much the same thing. The first one, which of the following best describes the results of the study, right? So the results may be described in the text, and there might be a graph to kind of show you the data, and then you need to be able to synthesize all that information and come up with the results. Next, which of the following was the treatment in this experiment? So in the science section, we talked about independent variables, dependent variables, and then the independent variable is going to be what the treatment is, right? So let me write it down here, independent variable usually indicates the treatment. So for an experiment, usually you have a control group, right, to compare to, and then you have your treatment or experimental group. So for example, if you're looking at, say, the effect of a drug on diabetes, right, the treatment is going to be the drug, right? All right, next one, which of the following describes, so it may ask you a specific detail from the study, from the text, or from the graph. Which of the following is a conclusion based on the passage and the graph? So you need to look at both the information from the passage and the information from the graph and come up with the conclusion. What additional data could be collected to provide more evidence about, some kind of result, some kind of a conclusion? So this is, again, is related to one of the science lessons we went over. So what kind of data that you can collect to strengthen the result and the conclusion of the study, right? So basically, the data provides more evidence to support the conclusion. And last, based on the description in the passage, select the most appropriate item. There's going to be more details here, which I don't have now, right? It has to be based on the specific passage. Okay, so like I mentioned previously, you may see questions with both a passage and a graph, and they complement each other, right? So the text is going to describe some of the general results, and then the results will be shown more specifically in the graph. So in this case, we have a bar graph. Now, this material actually came from a study that I found. So this is the 2018 National Sample Survey of Registered Nurses. And then from the passage, you can see that RNs enter the workforce through various educational pathways. So that means this passage this material probably talks about the educational background of RNs, right? Before they enter that RN program. Okay, and then if you keep reading, you see that this is a big number, right? This is more than half. This is more than 50%, half of all the responses. So the survey results showed that 67% of RNs were employed in a health-related job. Okay, so that's the key word, a health-related job. And then it talks about what's the most common one in that health-related job category. So you can see the most common one is nursing aides or nursing assistants, right? And that's 45%. So that's the highest number. And then it talks about the next highest number. And then it talks about something that really kind of stood out, right? About almost 14% of RNs reported having a LPN or LVN license prior to becoming an RN. Right? So this is kind of interesting results that really stood out. So the author wanted to highlight that in the text. So the category is over here. So that's also a very high number. Right? Now, when you see a graph, oftentimes it's very important to read the title or the figure caption for that graph. So over here, figure 1 is about distribution of RNs who were employed in a health-related job before completing initial RN program. So you know this is really about the distribution of responses from participants in the survey, right? So there are different categories, and once those participants submitted their responses, then those responses will be analyzed and put into these different categories. Okay. Now there is a footnote here. So that's a footnote. It says the total percentage is over 100%. And that's because some participants selected multiple categories, right? They can select all that applied. So that's why when you add all these numbers together, they're going to be more than 100%. So the author just wanted to point that out so that, you know, the data is fine. There's nothing wrong with the data, even though all the numbers add up to over 100%. Okay, now let's move on to the first question. I'm going to start with B. And then you can see A and B are the opposite, right? So one of them is going to be correct. The majority of RNs were not employed in a health-related job before completing the initial RN program. That's contradictory to what's described in the text, right? The survey results showed that 67% of RNs did have a health-related job, right, prior to completing the program. So that means 6-7, that's yes. And over here, this bar right here, which is about 33%, that's no. So it's a 67 versus a 33. So 67%, that's going to be the majority. Right? So the majority of RNs were employed in the healthcare related job before the RN program. So B is wrong and A is correct. So A is the correct answer here. Now, how about C and D? For those who had work experience working in healthcare prior to completing the RN program, almost half of them worked as LVN, LPN. So you need to find LVN/LPN category in the figure and then find the number for that category. So that category is right here, kind of in the middle. So the number is 13.5%. So that's not right, because half indicates it's going to be 50%, right? That's definitely not as high as 50%. All right, D, for those who had work experience working in healthcare prior to completion of RM program, less than 1% of them worked as home health workers. So find the home health worker category, just right here, right? Home health aide or assistant. And that number is 6.7%, which is higher than 1%. Now, if you made a mistake, you accidentally look at this category, community health worker. Now, the name is similar to home health worker, but it's a totally different category. And that number is less than 1%. So D is not correct because it should be 6.7%. All right, so the correct answer is A. Okay, next question. Number 2, which of the following describes the difference when comparing home health workers and community health workers? So you need to find the numbers for those two categories on the graph. So they're over here, as we determined from the last question. So you need to do a little bit of math, just basic math. Let's see. So this is about comparing the difference in the percentage points for those two groups. Right? So first, decide which category has a higher number, and that's going to be home health care, right? 60.7%, and it's much lower for community health category. So the difference is 6.7 minus 0.9, and that's going to be 5.8%. Home health care is higher. So which one is the correct answer? Is either A or D, right? Because that's the correct number. A is correct, right? Home health workers, 5.8 percentage points higher than community health workers. So A is the correct answer. Okay, now this is a different question. So again, it has a little bit of text and a pie chart this time. So you have about 45 seconds to go through the information, and then we'll move on to the question. First, it talks about how important nursing is. Nurses comprise the largest sector of the healthcare workforce. And then it talks about, oh, let's look closely into the nursing profession and learn about their workforce characteristics by exploring nurses by the numbers. So you're going to see some numbers on the different workforce characteristics of all the nurses. Some results are shown in the graph below. So again, read the caption of the figure. Highest in nursing and nursing-related educational attainment. And then when you read the pie chart, you see there are a few categories. Bachelor degree, so that means that's all the nurses with a bachelor degree, associate degree, graduate degree, diploma in nursing. And then there is a sub pie chart for just the graduate degree, right? So that includes two categories, master's degree and doctorate degree. Now let's look at the first question. Now, the first question asks about the topic of the graph. So if you read the figure caption, you can figure this out without any problem. This is about educational attainment, right? The highest degree that those nurses have achieved. So which one is about education? The last one, right? How is the nursing workforce educated? Oh, for some reason, my pen is not, there we go. D. So this is about the educational background of all the nurses in the workforce. Okay, question 2. Number 2 is about the interpretation of the information from the graph, whether you can read the graph correctly. Let's just start with D. Diploma in nursing is more popular than graduate degree. So in order to determine which one's more popular, you can just compare the numbers, right? So diploma in nursing, only about 6.4%, and graduate degree almost 20%, right? So that's not correct. C, people hesitate to get a graduate degree in nursing. That's not something that we can deduce just by looking at this pie graph. So do not just assume things. There's no mentioning whether people, have a lot of thoughts about going to graduate school to get a graduate degree in nursing. Okay, B, the least common education attainment is doctorate degree. So let's look at that. Doctorate degree, that's 1.9%. And it is lower than all the other numbers, right? So that is the correct answer. What about A? The most common education attainment is associate degree. Not really, right? This is almost 30%, but almost 45% had bachelor's degree. So that's going to be the most common one, bachelor's degree. So A is not correct either. All right, so correct answer is B. Okay, now last question. So this question is about greenhouse gas emissions. Don't want to tell you too much, so I'll give you about 30 seconds to read this table, and then we'll move on to questions. All right, this is about ways that you can do to decrease your greenhouse gas emissions. And these are the specific actions, and then that's the annual decrease in carbon dioxide production if you adopt any of those actions. All right, now let's look at the first question. Number 1, which of the following is the best approach to reduce the annual carbon dioxide production? So you need to look for the highest number, right? Because that number indicates the annual decrease. So which one is the highest number? A, use a high efficiency refrigerator. That's about 13,000 pounds. Carpool 2 days per week over here. So that's going to be almost 1,600 pounds. Walk instead of driving to work. If you do 10 miles per day over here, that's going to be 490, and drive an energy efficient vehicle over here. That's, oh, I'm sorry, buy a high efficiency appliance over here. Somehow I thought that was about the car, looking at the wrong row. So that's going to be over here, right? 400 pounds per appliance. So you have just one refrigerator over here, so that's going to be 400. And then last one, driving energy efficient vehicle, that's 13,000 pounds. So D has the highest number in reduction, right? So D is the correct answer. Okay, next question. Melanie does the following actions to reduce her carbon emissions. Identify the action that produces the highest reduction in carbon dioxide emission. Now you're going to think, oh, this is pretty much the same as question 1, right? Not exactly, and I'll explain why. So A, planted trees around the house. So that's going to be the third item, right, which is about 50 pounds. B, use a push mower. That's the second one. So that's about 80 pounds. C, use high efficient refrigerator, washer, and dryer. So that's 3 appliances, right? So you need to multiply this number by 3. So 400 times 3, that's going to be 1,200 pounds annually. And D, carpool 1 day a week, right? This number, regional number, is based on carpooling 2 days per week. So if it's just 1 day, then you need to divide it by half, right? So 1,590 pounds, you can round it to 1,600 to make the math a little bit easier. Divided by 2, that's going to be about 800 pounds. So which one has the highest number now after a little bit calculation? C, right? If you use 3 high efficiency appliances. So that's going to give you the highest carbon emission reduction among the 4 choices. Okay, that's the next passage. You have about 45 seconds to read it. Okay, question 1. All right, this passage is about hair loss, right? And specifically, talk about who may experience this condition and what the condition looks like, thinning hair or bald areas on their head. And then they talked about the causes for this particular condition, right? So it could be genetic factors that run in the family, could be some medical conditions or treatments. And there are a lot of other things that may also cause hair loss. And then it talks about one common type is known as alopecia areata. So this is a condition related to the immune system, right? It's an autoimmune disease, and the immune system, which normally helps protect the body, starts attacking the hair follicles. So as a result, there will be thinning or no hair growth at all. However, this hair loss is not permanent because the hair follicles are not destroyed. They're just not making new hair because they're stuck in a resting state. The cells are not dividing to make new cells, right, to make the hair grow. And then it talks about a promising research from a team led by Dr. Angela Cristiano, a skin disease expert at Columbia University. And they are working on testing a class of drugs called Janus kinase, JAK, inhibitors. So these JAK inhibitors can stop and even reverse the disease. So it talks about they're seeing some promising results, right? But they're going to do more clinical trials to determine how safe and effective JAK inhibitors are to treat this particular hair loss condition. So question 1, which of the following would be their treatment in the experiments conducted by Dr. Cristiano's group? Which one is it? The treatment, that's going to be the drug, right? So that's going to be C, the use of JAK missing inhibitors. Okay, so that's the correct answer. The amount of hair subjects had prior or after the experiment, that's going to be the dependent variable, and that's going to be the data that will be collected, right? So you're going to collect data on the amount of hair before and after the experiment, and then see if the drug had any effect on the difference, right, before and after the experiment. And B, the sex of the mice, that's not relevant, right? Their research uses real people because it says many people who took the drug had their hair grow back. So the test subjects are humans and not mice. Okay, so that's question 1, and this is question 2. So this is about extracting information from the passage, right? Question 2 asks about the cause of this particular hair loss condition. So what is the cause? It's an autoimmune disease, right? And this should be pretty familiar to those who have taken an anatomy and physiology class, because when we talk about the immune system, we would mention several autoimmune diseases. So those diseases are caused by overreacting immune system, right? Normally, the immune system would not attack cells, right? Because that's part of your body. But an overreacting immune system could attack the normal tissues and cells, and that leads to the disease. So correct answer is B. Okay, question 3. What additional data could be collected to provide more evidence about the potential of JAK inhibitors to treat human hair loss? And the key is to read the last sentence. Many clinical trials are now underway to determine how safe and effective these JAK inhibitors are, right? So there are two important aspects. It has to be safe and it has to be effective, right, in order to be used on humans. So C and D are not relevant. We're looking at hair loss specifically. We don't need to worry about other autoimmune diseases or other skin conditions. And B, this is about the cost, right? That's going to be one of those logistics when they mass produce these class of drugs, right? But that's not what the clinical trials focus on. So A is the correct answer. All right, that's the end of the lesson. Good job, guys. Feel free to share the video, subscribe, like the video, and leave me a comment. And I'll see you next time. I just have one short lesson left for the reading section. Okay, all right, bye. See you next time.